Here's my very grim forecast for public education in America during the second Trump presidency. Yes, these are predictions based on the words, actions, and proposed policies of Trump himself. Keep in mind, number one on this list is already on the docket. Congress votes to eliminate the Department of Education. If that doesn't pass, Trump will attempt to halt federal funding with another executive order. Elon and his executive branch cronies will also attempt to misappropriate education funding. Once federal funds are partially blocked, vital programs will begin to shut down immediately, and children will start to lose services immediately. Special ed services partially will be recategorized to make it easier to defund them. In Oklahoma right now, some of these speech services are already being recategorized as not educationally necessary. The Department of Education creates a standardized curriculum that aligns with the Trump agenda, if they exist, and if they don't, then the executive branch will do that. All schools across the country will be pressured to adopt the curriculum that is based off of 1776 Commission materials, with threats of withholding more funding by the Trump administration. Superintendents, of course, will fold like a lawn chair because they cannot risk losing that vital funding. Teachers begin being forced to teach Christian nationalist curriculum, revisionist history, and are threatened with their jobs for non-compliance at the more conservative school districts to start. Trump will then, I believe, offer a buyout, much like he did with all federal employees, to all public school teachers, even if he doesn't have the allotted funding or the power to do so. Many of these teachers would take that option because they refuse to go along with the Trump agenda, and it's just easier to bow out. All of these next items will affect low-income areas first and the hardest. Children become malnourished at school because they lose their free lunch programs. Special ed students lose access to services. Bullying and hate crimes and hate speech among student populations become worse because there are no protections under Title IX or the Department of Education anymore. Trans and queer students are persecuted systematically and driven out of the public school system. Republican teachers also start reporting their students en masse to ICE on a regular basis. Parents, because of all this, become overwhelmingly terrified to send their children to public school. The Department of Education continues throughout all of this to entice parents, encourage them to homeschool their children as the lifeline we didn't know we all needed. Parents will pull their kids en masse out of public school to homeschool their children. Are you ready? Because this is where it gets heavy. The mass exodus from public schools, empty school districts nationwide, opening a door for Donald Trump to finally end Title I funding, eliminate the Department of Education, and convince governors to defund schools on the state level. Because who's going to pay for schools that are empty? Schools close down or consolidate everywhere due to lack of funding, no staff, and low student attendance. Most students in rural or isolated, low-income urban areas will lose access to public schools nearby them because there are no private school options once the public school is closed down. Most parents are then only left with the only option is to homeschool their child. At that point, parents are going to quickly realize that they cannot homeschool their child because they don't have the skills to do so, and they seek an online option if they can afford it. Wealthy Trump cronies are going to invest in opening dozens of these online K-12 academies that are for profit, and those who cannot afford to send their children to these online academies or in-person private schools are going to be forced to homeschool their child, because women across the country are forced to quit their jobs in person to homeschool their child or potentially exit the workforce altogether. And of course, the economy takes a massive hit because adults everywhere have to quit their jobs to make sure that they can stay home and educate their child. All the while, Congress continues to pass laws that benefit private school entities because, say it with me, they are invested in those entities and or receive kickbacks from passing laws that make it easier for billionaires to open private schools and make money from them. The billionaire elites make a fortune off of the privatization of our public school system, and Congress then receives kickbacks from those corporations and billionaires. Billions of children are then left uneducated and unattended during the school day because parents just simply cannot afford to quit their jobs and stay home with their kids. In those areas specifically, you will see crime rates increase exponentially. Child labor laws are going to be eliminated, forcing kids to go back to work instead of getting an education, and that is going to affect our special education students the most. The wealthiest Americans, however, are going to continue to send their children to private schools and private universities, even though they've convinced all the working class that it's no longer necessary to get a college education if you can't pay for one out of pocket. The U.S. then becomes a nation of wealthy, educated elites and an uneducated population of low-income folks who have no option but to work for the corporations, go to the mines, go to the factories. And that all happens within a generation's time. So to sum up, women are forced back into the home, low-income students are robbed of a K through 12 education, trans and queer kids are voted out of existence and out of the public school system, families are financially ruined just trying to educate their child, millions of kids are unable to read and are forced to go back to work, special education students are institutionalized or neglected, public school teachers are demonized and jailed and professionally ruined, university professors are fired by their governor from their state university positions, the hostile takeover of the public universities happen all over the place, and the destruction of the K through 12 public school system by the Trump administration is complete. You may disagree with me about the order of events or whether or not specific items on that list are going to take place at all, but there's one thing you can't deny is that if they had their way, the Trump administration would be happy with all of that to happen, and they're going to facilitate everything to make sure that they are going to get their way.